It's showtime. And here we go. Welcome, everyone. This is Katrin with Blend Precisely and Seth with Blend Precisely. And as announced, we have today Phil Prather. Prather, is that correctly named?
Prather.
Prather. I'm German, so that could happen.
Yeah. I say
With
Prather
us.
when I'm in Germany.
Yes, I bet. With us here today, and he's calling in directly 6:30 from Australia, correct?
That's correct. Yes, it's winter time down here. So
It's not winter time here. You're wearing something thick right now.
Yes.
How cold is it?
Oh, it's not that bad by many North American standards, but it's probably about 48 degrees right now in Fahrenheit.
In Fahrenheit. Oh, that's pretty cold.
Yeah.
Which major city are you closest to?
Probably closest to Sydney. So I'm up at the farm right now. Our offices are in Sydney themselves, but our main farm is about a 7-hour drive north of Sydney.
Okay.
So there's a big resort town near our farm called Byron Bay, which is very famous for backpackers and tourists. So that you may be familiar with that.
I think I've actually been there.
Okay.
I took a trip through Australia back in 1998. So yeah.
Right. Well, if you went to Byron Bay and you went about 1 hour inland from there, that would be our tea tree and our essential oil farm.
Okay.
Which we're going to talk about today. And your company is called the Down Under Enterprise or Enterprises. And why don't you give us a little bit of a backstory while people are logging in, and for the some that will be also watching the recording, give us a little bit of a background.
Great. Thanks for this opportunity. So Down Under Enterprises was started by my wife 22 years ago. And it was to sell the tea tree oil from her parents' farm, and she started it because her previous career in management consulting and us having children as a family didn't mix. Traveling all the time for management consulting and having children, it just doesn't work. So she decided for a short period of time she would start to sell the tea tree oil from her parents' farm, which is also located nearby our farm. And she got into the industry and absolutely loved it. This was the early 2000s. There was still, a lot of the big naturals companies were still being led by very gregarious, interesting individuals. And people in the industry actually really believed in what they were doing. They weren't just selling product. They believed in natural. It was the beginning of the sustainability movements, the environmental movements, and she loved being in the industry. So, for the first 7 years, it was all about her. She did everything from washing the dishes to running the books to talking to customers and packing the orders and shipping them out. And we did that while we were living in the United States. My background is in medical devices, implantable cardiac devices, imaging devices, in vitro diagnostics. And we were there at the time with my job. We moved back to Australia, and the business started growing from there. She kept all of her U.S. customers and kept a warehouse in the United States. And the business started expanding and more of the requirements on companies that were offering essential oils were expanding as well. So a lot more regulatory control, a lot more documentation. So we needed to add staff to be able to bring that on. About 7 years ago, we decided to build our own farm. As I said, traditionally, she'd purchased the oil from her parents and then also from her brother. Her brother had quite a number of farms, essential oil farms. And we felt it was time to set up our own farm. So I left the medical devices industry and moved into being a farmer. So actually the scene, very, very different, but actually not so much. So the scene you see behind us is part of our tea tree farm. And you'll see a drone that we have up there. So we use drones on the farm on a routine basis from an imaging point of view, and also managing the farm. So a few different drones, but we've started bringing in a lot more technology, and because we have probably one of the newest tea tree farms in all of Australia, we were able to incorporate a lot of sustainability efforts, a lot of new initiatives into land management that hadn't been possible previously. So we went into this really understanding what our customer needs are, what the new regulatory environments are for farming and for essential oils in particular, and built that farm to those beyond those standards. So now now we have certification from our sustainability with an international sustainability ratings company called EcoVadis. We are a platinum rated. That puts us in the top 1% of over 90,000 companies worldwide that EcoVadis rates on their platform.
Wow.
And we're currently just finishing off our process as a B Corp company. So we're just going through the final steps with them of all the documentation, but should not be a problem. We've scored very well, certainly high enough to become part of that B Corp family, which is really interesting. If you're not familiar with B Corp, it has a lot of...
Yeah, if you could give us a little bit, because I've seen it a few times now, but the B Corp is something very special at this point.
It is. So again, it builds on all aspects of sustainability, not just environmental, but on the social side of things, the social fairness, human welfare, and also the governance, how you manage your company for making sure that you're looking after all inputs and all aspects of your stakeholders. So from your customers back through to your suppliers. So there's a lot of social justice in that. We work a lot with our employees to make sure that they feel connected and very much have a say in what we do. Even though it's a privately held company, my wife and myself, our employees feel very connected with everything we do, and we include them in a lot of that decision making in how things are run in the company.
And that is part of being a B Corp.
So
it is.
Just to be clear, B Corp is an Australian structure
or
US?
No, it's global.
Yeah, it's a global thing now, and it's a very high standard, and it's not easy to reach, and not many companies meet all the requirements. But I didn't know that you're going through the process, so that's amazing. That is really, really beautiful. And one thing I really saw on your website and I was interested in is the traceability and sustainability aspect we talked about a bit, but you're very transparent in every single step you do from the moment. Can you talk a little bit about, because that is extremely special too?
Yeah, it's a life philosophy for my wife and myself, and it's built into our mission statement. So we're very much into nature, and probably our favorite vacations is going up into Minnesota to the Boundary Waters and going camping, canoeing, and disappearing for a week at a time. If you're not familiar with the Boundary Waters, you'll likely see more moose than you see people when you're up there. Airplanes are not allowed to fly overhead to preserve the sanctity of the region. So we've loved things from an environmental point of view for a long time, and the other aspects of sustainability with making sure that our employees feel valued and involved, and that we're looking after social welfare and the environment and the communities that we're part of. It's a basic aspect to what we're about as humans. And on the traceability side, we've seen this coming for a long time. Consumers want to feel connected with where their products are coming from.
Second, if I share actually your website and we look at the wheel, that I think that would be very visual just for... Let me just share the screen, and then because I have your website open here, and then maybe we can go there directly. I don't know if you can actually see it. You can see it. Good.
Yes, so that was our dog. She comes into the office every day, and she chases the FedEx couriers, and they've gotten to know her that she's very friendly.
Yeah, she needed to be a part, and that's your wife here, I assumed.
That's my wife and myself, and that's the harvesting of tea tree. So when we
Okay.
grow tea tree, the tea trees don't grow as trees. They end up being like bushes. And we cut them down every year. We're not disturbing the soil, so we're just driving on top of the soil. We cut the trees down, and they will grow right back to about a 6 to 7 foot height every single year.
So they grow fast then, basically every
Yeah.
year. You just mentioned it. It's
Yes.
something. Wow. Okay. I did
Yep.
not
So the roots
know.
stay in the ground. Big initiative that we have underway now is to try to increase that carbon content in the soil, and the roots that are in the soil from those trees do a phenomenal job of that because the roots will, the microbes that live around the roots, they are what really drives the sequestration of the carbon into the soil. So we're doing a lot of work and research into that to try to increase that further.
Yeah, and it looks
I-
like a. Yeah, oh, Seth, go ahead.
Yeah, I really want to clap my hands here out loud. That's what you just said is one of the fundamental factors affecting our planet right now, but most people are not aware of it. So thanks very much for bringing that up.
No, that's okay.
Yeah.
So on here is if we scroll down, there's a
Yeah.
different wheel.
Okay.
Actually,
Let
not
me
on that.
see.
That's on our
No?
traceability side. So it's on the
Okay. Should I go to
sustainability,
sustainability? Okay.
if you would please. So that's
Absolutely.
our Ecovatus. Just back up above the video
Ah,
screen.
here we go. Yes.
Yes, and if you click on that little magnifying glass, you can see it'll magnify off to the right.
Oh,
There's a
here.
little
That's
magnifying
right.
glass. There you
Oh,
go.
perfect. So let's see if. Oh, yes, yes, yes. Okay.
Yes. So this is our cycle of sustainability. So this gives an overview pictorially of everything we do at and on the farm and with our operations and it starts with identifying the plants and what characteristics we need of the plants to produce a really good essential oil. So we look at aroma, we look at yield,
Here we
tolerance to
go.
the climate that we're in, pest
Mm.
resistance, and also conformance to standards. If there are standards, we would need to make sure, because we can produce many different plants, but if the plant itself, it won't produce the oil that we need, that our customers expect, then we're not going to get that oil. And I can go into more detail on this later on, but eventually we have to propagate those seedlings, we plant them, we maintain those plants throughout the year, and then we harvest them. And this is, it's not a one-time thing. The plants are harvested, but the plants stay in the ground. And so we have to look after those same plants year after year so that we continue to get a good crop, a good production. Kicking out from the distillation is the aspect of the lab analysis, the packaging, putting into the right packaging, putting the right security seals on it, and of course then getting it to all of you around the world.
Right.
Meanwhile, back on the farm, after the distillation, we have byproducts. We have the water distillate, which you'd commonly know as a hydrosol. We also have the spent biomass. For us on our farm, we turn that into a compost. I buy more chicken manure than you could imagine. And we combine that with silage, so farm waste like cut grass from neighboring farms, and we mix that with the tea tree mulch and turn that into this beautiful, amazing compost that we then spread back on the farm. And mix that in with our soil on the surface soil and push it back up onto the trees so that the trees have natural nutrients and filled with great, good microbes and ready to start the new growing season.
Yeah,
and then we go back into the cycle of looking after them and nurturing them. Now, the unique thing about this cycle of sustainability is that we spend time with our team every year looking at each one of those circles and where we can improve, where we can make changes to make it a better process, to incorporate new things into it. So one of those is how we mix the compost into the soil and refresh the trees with new nutrients. We use what's called a cultivator. And at the same time, that is mechanically weeding our farm. So we don't need to use as much chemical on the farm. Chemical is expensive. It's not good for the environment.
Yeah.
Sometimes we do, but it's unfortunately it's the thing that we need to have on farms. But and that's part of the reason why I have that drone picture up behind me and why the drone's there. So what we're working on the farm is to actually be able to spot treat as opposed to broad acre treatment when we do have problems. With our imaging drones, we can look very closely at the farm on a routine basis.
I'm gonna just
and
show
identify.
Yeah, I'm gonna show this you in solo layout. So here we can see it actually, the drone over here, right?
So this drone can work in concert with an imaging drone that can see things on what's called a spectral or a spectrum, so beyond the visual imaging, and it can identify up to 2 weeks before we see problems with visually with our trees. The spectral drone can identify issues, and we can go and treat that on a spot basis, and reduce the amount of treatment that we need on the farm.
That is so these are specially made for farming, these drones, I would
They
assume.
are, yep.
Yeah.
So that one right there has about a 25 kilo, about a 50 pound payload. But the newest one that we've got working on the farm is about double that.
Wow.
So it's amazing.
That is incredible. Wow, this is just something, to be honest, being an aromatherapist and working with many aromatherapists, and also the ones that are watching right now and will be watching this, and we are almost, I would say, disconnected to where everything is coming from.
Mm-hmm.
We go out and we buy these little bottles and we learn our things in school for sure, but and that's why I'm so grateful you're on. We are not as much in touch with the distiller or someone who actually works directly. And so this one is super important, I think, to know. So yeah, keep on going. It's so intense.
Sure. So now, some of your members are going to be saying, "Oh, I don't want to use chemicals. I would rather use organic and that." And that's great. It's a philosophy. Most people won't bear the cost of organic farming. A lot of organic farming is paperwork, but it's also, not working with the chemicals and that. And ultimately, what you're looking for is to have no presence of, any pesticides or herbicides or anything else. It's just the straight essential oil. But we achieve that with our conventionally farmed oils. And the way we do that, and the way other farmers will do that, is with what's called withholding periods. And a withholding period is the amount of time after a chemical has been sprayed that you have to wait before you can harvest, such that that chemical has totally broken down back into its organic compounds on the plant, in the soil. And we have an extensive tracking in our computer system that tracks our farm operations. So every single thing we do on the farm is tracked and logged. And before I go to harvest and distill, I go back and I check the withholding periods. And whatever the federal regulator here in Australia says we have to do for the withholding period, our time is doubled, just beyond no shadow of a doubt that there is any risk to having anything, because we don't want our customers to have anything but the essential oil.
All right. Sorry.
Yep. So we test that. So we send our oils to a federal testing lab that tests down to parts per billion. We get a 5-page single-spaced report back on all the approved chemicals that are used in Australia, as well as heavy metals. And we look to make sure that there is absolutely nothing in there. And I can assure you, we have never had an issue whatsoever. And again, it comes back to good farm practice and management.
Yeah. So, Seth, you just wanted to ask something.
Yeah. I just kind of wanted to ask the obvious question. So why do you need to use chemicals at all?
So you do if for example, if we have a major insect infestation, it will wipe out the farm.
Oh, wow.
So 3 years ago, we had a flood come through the farm, and floods can be great. They bring a lot of great nutrients to the farm, and the flood waters will deposit a lot, and it can save us having to fertilize in a year. It brings that much great nutrients. But the flood also means that we cannot get on our farm. It's too soft. We can't get the tractors in to do things. And part of the reason why we brought in the drones. Now, before we had the drones 3 years ago, we had this flood. And right after the flood, there was this caterpillar attack. And these caterpillars came in on the back of the flood and took 40% of what our normal harvest yield would be.
Ouch.
Wow, that can cost you many things. I mean, that's you need pretty much the 100% harvest to keep everything going and to pay your people and everything else. So
exactly. So as I said, we don't like dealing with it. We don't like having to spray it. I mean, it's expensive. We don't want to have to do it. And again, our philosophy, our life philosophy is we want to do things that are good for the environment. And that's where we've gone to things like the drone spraying so that we can reduce the amount. The other aspect with the drone is that it has a downdraft. So it's actually pushing through the whole plant and getting a much better coverage on that. So we're able to effectively deal with whatever that pest is on the plant. So that we do get a good crop. Now, the other aspect in trying to increase biodiversity on the farm, if you increase biodiversity, you're also going to get natural ways to deal with these pests. So we've planted thousands of trees around the border of the farm and through the middle and around our dams to be able to improve the bird life. And other animals, because the birds love a lot of those same insects. So if we can create a better environment for birds, they'll come and eat the insects, and it's great to see that. But sometimes there's just not enough birds.
No, you know what? It's funny. We just moved here to New Hampshire, and it's a completely new environment. We were before in Portugal, and for the first time, I had to deal with all of these different animals because they say in Portugal nothing can kill you. And it's true. But here, I mean, it needs just like one of these Japanese bugs that just wiped out the entire raspberry. And I can just imagine if that happens to a huge field of tea tree, or you have other oils as well, we will be talking about in a moment, that is devastating. It's just absolutely devastating. And I was contemplating, do I use now chemicals? What am I going to do? I looked up everything. The work involved in saving any of that is incredible.
Yeah, in fact, in New Hampshire, we also have a caterpillar problem.
Yes, we do.
They're just eating all of the trees, and so it's
but only in one spot. So So Phil, we have aromatherapists on here, and of course, one of the most favorite oils is sandalwood. And we hear that, of course, over and over again, endangered species. Can we talk a little bit more about the two different species you are also offering, and what is behind all of the, I don't want to call it hype because it's true, that sandalwood is endangered in some areas in the world. But so how does it look like in Australia?
Right. So great questions, Katrin. And sandalwood, it's probably one of the most revered essential oils and woods in all the world. The history of it goes back, many centuries, and it's part of the ancient medical treatments certainly in Indian and in Chinese cultures. Nowadays, as you mentioned, there's a shortage of sandalwood in those traditional locations. The Indian subcontinent has largely farmed out, harvested out sandalwood. because of the lack of control for that. And seeing that about 20 years ago, a number of Australian companies put into place Indian sandalwood plantations in Australia. Indian sandalwood takes about 20 or more years to get that tree to the point where it has enough of the sandalwood oil in its tree to be able to harvest and get something out that's of quality. At the same time, you've got the Australian sandalwood, which is a desert plant. It doesn't like wet weather. It wants to be in the desert. Both of these trees are parasites, so they need a host plant in order to survive. The Indian sandalwood, which we call Sandalwood album, and the Australian sandalwood, the botanical name for that is Sandalwood Spicatum. Both of them need a host plant. And so across Australia, especially Western Australia, you'll see that these plantations have come up to be able to supply sandalwood oil to the world and sandalwood products. A lot of the West Australian sandalwood is still wild harvested, and it's done under contract and management by the West Australian government under their Forestry Products Commission, or FPC. And part of that project, management of the sandalwood reserves of Australian sandalwood is replanting tens of thousands of sandalwood seeds back into the ground every year in the regions where they've harvested. Now, for those of your viewers who aren't familiar with Australia, and myself, I'm coming from the United States originally, and moved down here. I never realized when I grew up in the US that Australia was so big. Basically, from the east coast to the west coast of Australia is exactly the same. It's in Canny. It's exactly the same as the United States. So think about the Western Australian desert where the Australian sandalwood grows from about the Mississippi River all the way to the California coast is Western Australia.
That is a huge area.
It's a massive area. And so they are able to harvest select areas around that region and not go back to that same region for more than 20 or 30 years. So they cycle these regions around to harvest the wood. There's sacred sites, sacred regions for the Australian Aborigines that they don't touch. And there's also some regions where the Aborigines are involved with the government in harvesting their sacred sandalwood and supplying that as well. So it's a very well constructed program that the West Australian government has managing that. And it's been in place for a number of years, and they've been improving their sustainability standards and their certifications and such. And the Indian sandalwood is a much more recent introduction to Western Australia, although there was some indigenous Indian sandalwood album growing in Australia. These large plantations that are now coming into production are providing obviously good, sustainable sandalwood coming out of Australia. So as a result, now over 80% of the world's sandalwood supply is now from Australia.
Wow.
I did not know that. Over 80%.
Over 80%, and it's growing.
Yes. Wow. So in that case, how would you say it is actually, a thought just came. It looks like Australia takes very much care of the environment as well as plants and everything. How would you say is it different to the United States? Like, what is your feeling in general in that area, Australia, United States?
Right. Well, we'll put politics to the side, and we'll look at the average consumer.
Yeah.
Australian consumers have adopted environmental activities in a huge way. The last time I looked at it, the rate of rooftop solar in Australia is by far the greatest in the world. Just about every house has a solar array, solar panels on their roof, and are producing so much solar energy that the grid can't handle it. It
Seth,
can't
that's
take
your kind of country.
We're
it
moving to
can't take the
Australia.
power back into the power grid, and they're having problems with it because that's providing so much so-called base load during the day that the power plants don't need to be working as much, except for when the sun doesn't shine.
Wow.
And that's where I just saw on the news last night, they're starting to install local batteries, like community batteries. And so as a community,
Okay.
you can sign up to have your solar energy going back into these community batteries that are sitting next to like transformer drop-down stations in your area to hold some of that charge, that excess supply that's coming onto the market, so that it can then be used when the sun doesn't shine or the wind doesn't blow.
How is it
That's
possible to have that in one
No.
country and not in another one? I mean, I know from Germany they are trying to do this very much. Every new building needs to have solar and so on. But I mean, there should be a way, you would think, that the United States, with all of what they have available, they should be able to do that. But as
Yeah.
again, you mentioned it, it's a political discussion and it's probably best to put there. But that's
Exactly.
incredible. I was just,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and so there's a lot of initiatives going on from a sustainability point of view down here in Australia. The essential oils industry is doing a lot towards that. So back on to sandalwood, and from a sustainability, one thing that the U.S. is doing is in October last year, they enacted a new phase of the U.S. Lacey Act. The Lacey Act came into effect many, many years ago to protect various species from overharvest or from extinction. And the phase 6 of the Lacey Act came into effect in October last year. And there's 2 essential oils that are in particular affected in that phase. One is rosewood, and the other is sandalwood. So what the US Lacey Act requirements call for now is that as the importer of sandalwood into the United States, that importer, whoever is bringing that into the country, is liable for all government regulations and making sure they're compliant with the law all the way back to where that oil was originally harvested. So where the tree was harvested.
That's a ship to wear as an end consumer or somebody who buys that. That's really good.
There are heavy penalties. If you go online and you look at Lace and you Google Lacey Act lumber liquidators, you'll see a case study where the federal government took lumber liquidators to court and fined them very heavily for sourcing timber from the eastern Siberian forests. This was a protected timber. The timber was sent to China. They processed it into floating floorboards, and then lumber liquidators imported it into the United States. So this was effectively a protected species.
I got it. I'm going to put it in the chat, actually. I just found it. So that's...
So the same thing is going on with sandalwood. So if you are importing sandalwood, so if you're buying it and from somebody that says they're selling it to you from India or from somewhere else, you are liable. If you're getting it, FedEx or US Post into to you from overseas, you as the importer are liable for
I don't think many people would know
regulations.
That.
No. So
and that came into place when?
In October, beginning of October last year, 2021.
Okay, it's very new.
So, it puts a big onus on that importer. And we, as an importer of many hundreds of kilos of sandalwood a year into the United States, we fill out a lot of paperwork and provide a lot of validation. And we can do that because we know where that oil comes from. We know the farm where it comes from. We know the region in Western Australia where it might be harvested, and working with the Forestry Products Commission from the West Australian government, we can put our hand on our heart and say, yes, we know, and we are confident that we're supplying fully traceable and sustainable sandalwood.
That's incredible. And the work involved, and I mean, that is just something to think about. I'm getting questions in here right now, but I think that's amazing that something like this, harsh but good, was put in place or got put in place.
Yeah. So governments are doing some good things, even in the United States.
And we had a talk with the Amit Institute, and Kelly Abrar, she's really working hard as well to bring this out. And another reason why we implemented this also in our software, we just want to be you just want to make people aware of what is going on beyond the small bottle you go and buy in the store or wherever you get your oils from, but you don't get the information necessarily from the oil supplier or a store where you buy the oils. So something like this does not come through at all.
Yeah. So for us, we supply a GC and our certificate of analysis with every batch of oil that we supply.
Yeah.
Now, for Sandalwood, that means our minimum order quantity is 1 kilo, and that's a lot for a lot of people, especially on a private in a private aromatherapy practice. But if you are working with somebody who's buying our oil and putting it into smaller bottles, more appropriate for your practice, you can get access to that same GC, the trace, as well as the COA.
And that was one of the questions I had. So somebody just quickly, Phil had a question before I forget. So does the Indian sandalwood grown in Australia, I'm going to put it up here, have the same properties?
Yes, it absolutely does. So the seeds came from India. They then did some breeding work on the seeds to try to improve their sustainability, the growth of the trees that they were growing, and that they were producing the right oil output. So if you look at the oil profile, it's fully meeting the ISO standard for Indian sandalwood, which, by the way, has just been updated earlier this year for Indian sandalwood and Australian sandalwood. The ISO standard was just recently updated.
So somebody also gave you a compliment, Phil, pretty descriptive on the geography, very visual with the Mississippi, and I'm so in love with sandalwood. So that was really, really nice.
That's great.
So, it's Andrea, and Donna says, very interesting information. I'm glad I was able to join today. Yes.
Thanks, Donna.
And the same with Andrea. She's also showing up here. So I'm curious. So in general, what you just mentioned is your minimum order quantity is 1 kilogram. That is obviously for a normal traditional aromatherapist hard to come by and do.
It is.
But my mind is just squirming and finding possibilities in general to get actually the oils much more directly to us aromatherapists, instead of always going through all of these different suppliers, never getting the information I just got here from you, Phil.
Right.
And there are always possibilities one can work with something like this, but also you have how many different oils are you supplying currently?
So down under, although we grow our own oils, we also broker oils from other typically mom and dad growers around Australia who are passionate about that particular plant species that's growing in their area that they're producing essential oil from. And that's where we can provide this great traceability, because we're great friends with them. We also go out, we take the opportunity to go visit them. We do audits on them, and there's a trust between us and them. And with that, we've got, there's this ability for us to provide this full traceability all the way back to our growers. With that, we now have a portfolio of about 34 Australian native. So we don't deal. Sure. Well, eucalyptus. So every single eucalyptus species around the world originated in Australia. Although it's grown all over the world now, it all originated in Australia. So we have about 8 different species of eucalyptus essential oils. Some that smell like strawberry to peppermint. We have a new one that has a fresh green apple, almost like a green Jolly Rancher sour apple aroma on top of the eucalyptol smell. It's amazing. We were just at the World Perfumery Congress in Miami just at the end of June, and the perfumists we were talking to, they were going crazy about this oil. It's called Eucalyptus yandi. And yandi is the native Aboriginal name for this type of eucalyptus tree. And it's got this great fruity green apple aroma. And we're just launching. It's fantastic.
Oh my goodness.
So we've got all these different, really unique, and again, you said the world of medical devices is so different from the farming, but the essential oils that come from these plants are so similar to what I was dealing with in medical devices. So each one of those components, as your members would know, they've got therapeutic properties. And there's so much more medical and scientific information that's been published in reputable peer-reviewed journals nowadays about the efficacy of those various components and those oils as a whole. So we're getting more and more where the natural benefits of these oils are coming into modern medicine.
And that is exactly what we want to see and go for. Seth, did you have a question? You were just, sorry.
Yeah. You sound like you're really aware of the full playing field that you're part of in terms of how much quality and sustainability and traceability there is. So we've seen a few documentaries on Netflix about essential oils. Some of them not so happy about some of the rogues out there, particularly with frankincense and whatnot. How do you
name it?
Yeah, you're aware of these, yeah. So do you feel like the majority of producers are trying to do the right thing, or how would an individual as an aromatherapist know that most of what they're buying is the good stuff and not the bad stuff?
Yeah, it's a great question, Seth. And I might take a sidestep on that and come back to that in a circular sort of way. Another hat I wear, in fact, I'll be heading off to that here in a little bit this morning, is as the chair of the board of directors of the Australian Tea Tree Industry Association. And the acronym for that is ATTIA, ATTIA. And one of the things that we've done with ATTIA for many years, and we encompass well over 95% of all tea tree growers in Australia in this association. We have done retail surveillance of retail tea tree bottles around the world. And what we typically find is that if you are buying from a reputable retailer, that tea tree is typically pure and usually coming from Australia. If you're buying online and the price is too good to be true, it usually is. In Europe recently, we just we just brought back over 30 samples of so-called tea tree oil that were purchased on a retail shelf from convenience or discount retailer stores, and over 40% of that tea tree was adulterated. And some of the components we find that it's been adulterated with, you could only call it industrial waste. Because they're taking, there's we've even found traces of hashishine in it. Hash,
that is 40%.
40%. Now, we weren't going to, it wasn't scientifically collected as far as randomized samples, but the more you go towards discount, the more likely you are to have this situation. I bought a sample of tea tree and sandalwood in the United States, or one of my sales reps did in the United States, from an online brand called Gaia, G-Y-A.
Yes.
The tea tree was completely rubbish, and the sandalwood oil had no sandalwood in it.
No way.
What?
None.
Oh my
Oh my
God.
goodness. I mean, how in the world? I mean, Phil, tell me that there are some suppliers in the United States the
Oh, that's
aromatherapists can
bad.
trust, actually.
There are, you know, I can. We don't talk about our customers'
Yeah,
names,
I
but
understand.
you know, if it feels like a company you can trust that has people behind it, you know, they've got a long history of, you know, being there and providing quality oils on the market. They're in reputable retail outlets. You know, they're providing good stuff. Now,
Well,
from
at
the
least we know a company not to buy from. That's already good to know.
yes, and you know what, I may risk you know, having an email or
No, it
communication from
does
them,
not
but I
matter.
have the lab results to
Yeah.
prove it, and
Right.
it's
So
shocking.
is
For
what?
tea tree, sorry,
Yeah,
Seth, go
good.
ahead.
Yeah. In my conversation with Kelly Ablard, her focus is on endangered species. But and one of the things that I asked her was like, well, is there like a scale, like in Europe for refrigerators or any appliance? There's like A, B, C, or D
Mhm.
on how well it's functioning. Uh, is there such a thing for like corrupt companies or good companies, or like does
I
anything like
haven't
that
seen
exist?
it. I mean, you've got the Better Business Bureau, but that is so, you know, it doesn't really cover, you know, how well their what the quality of the oil is for that. And we often get asked, you know, what's the different quality standards of tea tree?
Hmm.
You know, do you have technical grade and industrial grade and pharmaceutical grade? You see all these different claims. They're just names. I mean,
Right.
really, in the world of essential oils, you've either got pure essential oils or not pure. You know,
Right.
it's really, it breaks down to that. You know,
Yeah.
it's
Hmm.
either what's coming straight out of the still, going into a drum, or something else is being done to it. So let's take, for example, another one. Katrin, you wanted us to talk about the Eucalyptus Kochii. So
Yeah.
Eucalyptus Kochii is a native Australian, again, another native Australian eucalyptus oil. It's amazing environmental story. It used to grow across more of the coastal area of Western Australia. So sort of California um, region in what is now called the wheat belt. And so in governments in their infinite wisdom, they told farmers, go west, farm this area called that we're calling the wheat belt, cut down all these trees and plant wheat in this amazingly fertile soil. And it's now a major wheat producing region for the world. Unfortunately, what that also did is the trees out there, the Eucalyptus Kochii trees, had really, really deep roots, 24 meters deep. And those trees love water, so it was holding the water table down um, down below the surface. When they cut down the trees, the water table started coming up towards the surface. Now, being so close to the Indian Ocean and the prevailing winds being from the west, from the ocean onto the land, that had for many millennia had blown salt and other salts and minerals onto this land, which all settled down through the soil. But when that water table started coming up, all of those salts started coming up and they started running into massive salinity issues. So a number of innovative wheat farmers started planting their wheat crops and being spaced with Eucalyptus Kochii rows of trees. And that started bringing the water table back down in those regions. So they've been addressing the salinity issues by replanting the native species eucalyptus called Eucalyptus Kochii. Now, Eucalyptus Kochii is the highest eucalyptol yielding species in all of the over 750 species of eucalyptus that are
It's
out there.
90 or 95%?
About somewhere between there. Yep. So our typical batch is about 93%, and that's natural. Now, you compare that to typical Eucalyptus globulus, which we all know, everybody knows the globulus aroma. The Eucalyptus globulus naturally is a 60 to 65% eucalyptol
Wow.
essential oil. To get to the 80, 85 that everybody knows, typically this is coming from China. And typically you've got people in little villages that are going up into the hillsides and they're cutting branches and they're bringing it back to a village distillery. That village distillery is typically burning the spent biomass in an open air still. And that raw eucalyptus then will be batched up and it'll be taken to a larger metropolitan area, more like a chemical refinery. And they will then blend all of that oil. They'll chop the tops and tails off of that, and they'll give you the central part of that eucalyptus oil, which has now been buffered with more eucalyptol, very often coming from camphor, because the camphor tree and its roots and its trunk, if you've ever cut into a camphor laurel tree, it has a really strong eucalyptol aroma. So very often what you'll find is that the eucalyptus oil that you're getting from China is filled with eucalyptol from camphor laurel.
Oh.
And you also want to watch because there's a lot of eucalyptus timber production that goes on in China as well. And they still spray a chemical called chlorpyrifos, which is now banned in the United States. It's banned in Europe. It's banned in Australia. That is used on a broad aerial spraying, like with planes, to control timber borers. But there's no withholding periods for this when the local villagers go out and chop down the leaf biomass. And we're finding this in eucalyptus oil, the chlorpyrifos, coming in the Eucalyptus globulus.
So that just makes me want to buy from you, period.
We're only buying from you, Phil.
Again, it comes back to knowing where your oil is coming from and knowing what's happened to your oil. So,
And
we don't run a difficult business model. Literally, we take the oil from the still, we put it in drums, and then we send it to our customers. There's no playing around with it, or we don't have chemical engineers on staff and refraction facilities. You're getting the pure, straight oil. So this Eucalyptus Kochii, again, it's a great environmental story. It's producing really high natural eucalyptol content. It's got a fresh, the perfumist at the World Perfuming Congress said it smells like what eucalyptus should smell like, not this candy, fake, eucalyptus that we're used to smelling in saunas, for example.
Yeah. Well, and everywhere else where you can just imagine eucalyptus is being used.
So, Katrin, we probably only have a few minutes left.
Yes, and that's exactly because you also have to go, and we are actually already over time. But I really wanted to just one more time. So when people want to know more about what you do, they can obviously go to the website. I have it mentioned in our section. It's going to go out in our emails as well. But also, what would you tell aromatherapists at this point, just to give them on the way what to look out for and how critical they should be, or how they can be critical enough, I guess? What kind of questions would you ask as an aromatherapist to your supplier?
So challenge your supplier, find out what quality control they do, find out if they get a batch by batch specific GC on that batch to make sure that they know what is in that oil. Does your supplier know where the oil is coming from? Now, the GC, I had a customer recently, we asked them, do you know where your oil is coming from? And they said, yeah, I've got a GC. I said, how does a GC tell you where the oil came from? Where is the source? Is it traceable? Do you know where in the world it came from? What were the growing conditions? What was the impact on the land? What was the impact on the people? Okay, so there's a lot more of a focus on fair work and also a living wage. So a living wage is defined as 40% of the average income for that country. So I looked up this morning before getting on this call. So South Africa is coming on with a lot of essential oils these days. The average wage, monthly wage in South Africa is 489,000 Rand. That converts to about 2,000 US dollars. Okay, so per month. So if you break that down to per week, about $500 US per week. And if you look at an average work day, you can break that down further. So you got to ask, are those people that are out there by hand with machetes, are they making that per day? If they're not, then it's effectively modern day slavery conditions.
It is, and I
And that's what
wonder
the UN says.
Yeah, it's true, and that's why I wonder so much how or if a supplier would even give us this type of information. I mean, I wish they would. And Jackie just said, can you add a tab to your website to find retail suppliers of your oils?
Yes,
And I know, yes, I would say that too, because it's just we could support those. But I understand there is like the clause, and you do not talk where the things are going. So Jackie, that just means we have to buy our oils from Phil, and then we have to distribute them amongst our aromatherapists.
We're happy to do that. So we have an 800 number. You can call that 800 number. You'll get our U.S. sales team. We have a U.S. warehouse in Ohio, in Cleveland, Ohio. So we take all the issues of importation out. It's available there. But again, if you're buying Australian oils that are coming from Australia and you're buying from a reputable retailer or direct from a especially the co-ops and that out there, if you're looking for tea tree, there's a pure Australian tea tree logo that the ATTIA organization that we sponsor, and if you go to the ATTIA website, you'll find a lot of those companies on there that are endorsed by the Australian Tea Tree Industry Association.
It's ATTIA, ADIA,
ATTIA.org.au.
Okay.
So that's the Australian Tea Tree Industry Association, and we then certify companies that are producing retail tea tree, where you can be confident that they're getting that. And these companies have all signed legal statutory declarations that said they will only buy Australian tea tree where they know the source of the oil, and we can confirm that as the organization.
So can I assume that you're actually one of the biggest suppliers from Australia?
Certainly to the United States, yes.
Okay, that's good to know. All right. Yeah. Well, Phil, if there's anything else you would like to add, I don't want to go over time. I know you have to go somewhere, but I'm getting a lot of messages in. They are so happy you were here, and they just want to come and visit you and do everything else.
Well, things are opening up again. So, we do. I just had a customer from France on the farm just 2 days ago.
Oh, beautiful.
So we do have people come visit us. So please let us know. We can always put a group, welcome a group of your aromatherapists to visit and to see. Once you get on the farm and you experience it, then it's like nothing else.
Yes, I bet. I mean, it's like being in touch with it directly. One quick question came in. Do you also ship from Ohio it was, to Canada, actually?
Yes.
Okay.
On a routine basis. Yeah.
All right, Sylvia, there's your question answered. Thank you so much, Phil. I wish you all the best. Say hi to your entire team from all the aromatherapists from the United States, Canada, actually all over the world as well. We are a big community here, and I really appreciate having you here.
Thanks for the opportunity, Katrin. Seth, thank you, and everybody there. Thanks for your interest in Australian essential oils, and we look forward to helping you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Nice to meet you.
Great.
Have a good
Thank you.
morning.
Take care.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.